The Tower of Babel wasn't some circular tower to the heavens. It was a ziggurat just like the one that still stands in Iraq today. In fact, we know where the Tower of Babel was. Its footprint remains, though all the bricks were stripped away and used for other purposes. I'm not only going to tell you why God destroyed the tower, I'll show you exactly where it was. Humanity had a fall in Genesis 3 at the Garden of Eden. We've had a second rebellion in Genesis 6. That was so bad that permeated both humanity and the spiritual realm so deeply that God sends a flood. After the flood, Noah and his sons emerge from the ark, and God says to them, "Okay, we're going to try again." God repeats the original Edenic mandate to go forth, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. There's a reference in Genesis 9 to humanity still bearing the image of God. You're still my images. I want you to go out and do the original job of Eden. We're going to start over again. So do that. Spread out, populate, and spread my goodness and the knowledge of me throughout the world. And this is what I want done. So what will they do? They congregate at Babel. By this point, it's only been like 350 years since the flood. And at this point, God has had enough. And that's the backdrop for the story of the Tower of Babel, which we find in Genesis chapter 11. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. So we see here everyone spoke a single language, and rather than spreading across the earth and multiplying like God commanded, everyone settled in a single location. We also see they figured out how to create bricks and mortar which they can use for building permanent structures, making it difficult to scatter across the world as God commanded them. Continuing on in verse 4. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." They've now decided to actively reject the command of God and stay where they are. They use the bricks which they figured out how to make to now make a tower, to make a name for themselves as a single people group, to avoid being scattered across the world, actively rejecting the command of God. Additionally, they say the top will be in the heavens, which is why so many depictions of the tower are spiraling up into the clouds. An absolutely ridiculous and false representation of what it actually was. Now on to verse 5. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech." God comes down and inspects the tower and city. He determines that anything they set their mind to will be possible for them. So he decides to confuse their language. Verses 8 and 9. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. God confuses the language of all the people, and they leave the tower to go find their own lands to reside in. So that's the story. It's short, but telling in many ways. Some people claim that they built the tower to avoid another flood. They are wrong. The ancient people wouldn't have started building the tower in the lowland plains if that was the reason. They were idiots. Some people make the claim, and I've seen a few videos about this, that they somehow opened a portal to the spiritual realm. This they managed to somehow extrapolate out of the text where it says they built it to the heavens. Next, loads of people love to claim that God destroyed the tower. Again, wrong. Nowhere does it say that. What it does say is that the people didn't finish building it. Here's why they built the tower. Firstly, to have a central place of worship for their people group. And secondly, it was built to be seen from miles away, reminding everyone of their common beliefs and culture. Hence why it says, "Lest we be dispersed." This was a cultural and religious symbol of unity and strength. Now, we know God wasn't only upset with them because of the tower, because the Sumerians built more of these towers later, and God didn't come down again to confuse everyone. We also know it wasn't about it being some tall tower that reaches to the heavens. We have skyscrapers today, and God never stopped us from building those. God came down and confused people because they refused to obey his command and spread out across the earth. The word ziggurat means temple whose foundation creates aura. These were temples used for worship, and even after the event at Babel, as I said, new towers were built and worship continued. So, what did the tower actually look like and when was it built? It was built about 350 to 400 years after the flood, or about 2100 BC, on the plains of Shinar, in modern-day Iraq. It would have looked pretty much exactly like the great ziggurat of Ur, which still stands today. God tells us how we are to worship Him. He provides instructions for us. Not only was the Tower of Babel built for worship, but it was built to worship gods other than Yahweh. And even if it were built for Yahweh, the tower was offensive to God because the top is where God was expected to reside. Humans telling God where they expect Him is not appropriate. God tells us what we should do to honor and worship Him, not the other way around. But the dispersal of humans across the world wasn't the only event that happened at the tower. I want to take a look quickly at Romans chapter 1, which echoes what happened at the Tower of Babel. For although they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks to Him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Paul tells us in Romans that even though some people knew God, they didn't honor Him, and because of this, God gave them up to their own hearts and their own ways. Now, let's take a look at Deuteronomy 32, starting in verse 8. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when He divided mankind, He fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is His people, Jacob His allotted heritage. Here we see the same thing as Romans. We are told that when God divided mankind, that's the incident at Babel. He gave the nations their inheritance and He fixed the borders based on the number of Elohim, or sons of God. So at the Tower of Babel, God divides everyone up and gives each nation a God to guide them through history. But then it says that God chose Israel for Himself. God basically says, okay, this is how you want to live. Have at it. He divorces humanity. He disinherits them from being in His family. He cuts them off. He abandons them. And He's upset, but I'm still interested in making this work, and I have a plan for you. In Deuteronomy 4, we see Moses chastise Israel for not obeying God. And beware lest you raise your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, you be drawn away and bow down to them and serve them, things that the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. But the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be a people of His own inheritance, as you are this day. This further reinforces the idea that the other nations inherited other gods. But Yahweh is for Israel. But when you move on to Psalms 82, we see God is angry again, and He punishes these other gods and says they will die like any man. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men you shall die, and fall like any prince. These lesser gods promote idolatry and other sinful behavior. Which brings us right back to Genesis 6 and the Nephilim again, and the need to punish the watchers which God set over those before the flood. He sentenced those pre-flood Elohim to spend all of their time in the abyss until the return of Jesus, when they will be destroyed. Now here we are again in Psalms, and God is once again issuing a sentence against this new batch of gods which led humans astray. This is what's happening at the Tower of Babel. The people are not obeying God, and He says, you know what, fine, go do it your way, and we'll see how that works out. I'll take Israel, and both groups will be an example. Israel an example of me, and all the other nations an example of their own hearts. I hope you find blessing in this. Thank you for watching. I encourage you to subscribe so you don't miss any content upcoming. If you have any specific topic you would like me to discuss, please let me know in the comments.